We are here to celebrate. We will celebrate a new lecture that is going to bear the name of the first president of Europe, the president of the European Council. It's a new baby with blushing cheeks, and talking of babies, I think we all beautiful images we saw on television after the final session of the European Council under the presidency of Herman Van Rompuy, when we saw all those heads of state and government of the EU being joined by a real family with beautiful babies, some Van Rompuy babies. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what tonight is all about. It's about what Europe can mean in the years ahead for our children and grandchildren. That's what we're going to discuss. And the initiative has two spiritual fathers. One is the Wilfried Martens Center, named, of course, after the man who did so much to make the European People's Party into what it is today. Political foundation, think tank, and therefore, to start our proceedings, we're now going to hear from the former Prime Minister of Slovakia, who prepared his country for entry into the EU, and he's the president of the Wilfried Martens Center, Mr. Mikuláš Dzurinda.
Thank you very much, Alex, for introducing me. Dear Mr. Herman Van Rompuy, dear Mr. Beke, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I am really delighted to welcome you tonight to the inaugural Herman Van Rompuy lecture, which is organized, as already has been said, by the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies, and one of our member foundations, one of founding member foundations, which is CEDER, the study center of the Christian Democratic and Flemish Party. The Martens Center is always very happy to be in close cooperation with our partners from CEDER, whose work serves to reinforce substantive development of Flemish Christian democracy in this country. On this occasion, I am particularly honored to collaborate on this project, which aims to pay tribute to a Flemish, Belgian, but also European statesman, Mr. Herman Van Rompuy. The annual Herman Van Rompuy lectures are an attempt by the CD&V party, in collaboration with CEDER and the Martens Center, to take the lead, to commit to tackling the challenges of tomorrow, and to seek solutions that connect and strengthen people. The event's aim is to provide a forum for speakers who can inspire and motivate us in the search for answers and solutions that we need in today's really challenging society. As national chairman of the Flemish Christian Democrats, as the Prime Minister of Belgium, but indeed as the President of the European Council, Mr. Van Rompuy proved himself an inspiration. He left a legacy like few before him. As the first unanimously elected full-time European Council President, Mr. Van Rompuy was a groundbreaker who garnered a reputation as a successful consensus builder at a time when the European Union faced a number of really significant challenges. By the way, in time when Mr. Van Rompuy was holding the presidency of the European Council, I served as the foreign minister of my country. It was my latest or the last executive political position. And thanks to this position, I had several opportunities to meet, to observe, to listen President Van Rompuy. And I can only witness how impressive, how captivating is the combination of being smart, professional, hardworking, responsible on one side, but also very moderate and very normal on the other side. Mr. Van Rompuy exemplifies the type of the leader who is indeed very needed in Europe. And that is why we honor him tonight. Today, in these days, the European Union still faces challenges, and this is what makes our discussion tonight so pertinent. It is important to discuss economic and social issues, such as the fallout of the euro crisis, the refugee situation, increased terrorism, but also populism in Europe, and not only in Europe. In order to address these challenges, and indeed to find new opportunities for us going forward, we are honored to be graced with the presence of Mr. Van Rompuy and our keynote speaker, Mr. Jeremy Rifkin, to discuss the path towards a new economic and social model for Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is a privilege and an honor to share the stage this evening with a New York Times best-selling author and the principal architect of the European Union's third industrial revolution, long-term economic sustainability plan, Mr. Rifkin. In a few moments' time, we will hear an exciting analysis of our time, the situation of mankind, and the big trends in technological change. Mr. Rifkin will draw from his latest book, the acclaimed Zero Marginal Cost Society, and he will share with us his insights on the future of capitalism, the sharing economy, energy transition, and the general state of the world we are in. So, on behalf of the Martens Center, I would like to thank Mr. Rifkin for his kind acceptance of our invitation to speak to us at this inaugural event, the first of many annual Herman Van Rompuy lectures to come. I wish you all a fruitful discussion and an enjoyable evening. Thank you very much.
Dames en heren, de tweede geestelijke vader van de Herman Van Rompuy-lezing, Wouter Beke, CD&V-voorzitter.
Dank u wel, ladies and gentlemen, dames en heren. Wanneer een instelling, een organisatie, een beweging, een universiteit of een politieke partij start met een lezingencyclus, dan is dat een moment dat een zekere plechtstatigheid verdient. Dat is wat vanavond ook gebeurt. Daarom hebben we u uitgenodigd. Daarom zitten we ook in deze magnifieke, prachtige zaal. En dat geldt dus niet minder voor de installatie van deze Herman Van Rompuy-lezing. De meeste mensen krijgen een lezing na hun dood. Als een soort eerbetoon voor de verdiensten tijdens hun leven. Maar je hebt ook mensen die erin slagen al tijdens het eerste deel van hun leven ten gronde een verschil of het verschil te kunnen maken. Dat zijn mensen die directeur zijn geweest van een studiedienst van de beste partij van Vlaanderen. Dat zijn mensen die daarna een politieke partij leiden. En ik weet, dit soort mensen, ze lopen niet dik, maar ze bestaan. Onze partij kan terugblikken op een rijk verleden. En ook vooruitblikken op een rijke toekomst. En dat zullen we vanavond ook doen. Dat rijk verleden is gedragen door sterke mannen en sterke vrouwen. Die een stempel gedrukt hebben op de politiek en bijgevolg ook op het leven in dit land. En van vele mensen in dit land. Ik ga geen namen beginnen noemen, want dan zijn we morgen ook bezig. Maar dat Herman van Rompuy in dit rijtje thuis hoort, dat leidt geen enkele twijfel. Ik herinner mij een column van Koen Meulenaren, waarin hij een stuk van Rik van Kouwelaert analyseerde. Rik van Kouwelaert had, zoals hij dat goed kan en goed kon, een doorwrocht stuk gemaakt over de politieke toestand. Gespekt en doorspekt met vele quotes of the record. Hij had het over een CD&V-bron, zegt. Een partijtopper weet te vermelden. Een voormalig eerste minister vertelt. Een politiek ancien zegt. Een parlementair van vele jaren heeft het over. Waarbij Koen Meulenaren schamper stelde dat die bronnen allemaal één en dezelfde man betroffen. Van Kouwelaert had gewoon 5 minuten gebeld met Herman van Rompuy. Of het waar was, zullen we nooit weten. Maar op de grimas te zien, Herman, moet er iets van waar zijn. Maar het zou alleszins gekund hebben. Waarom vertel ik dit? Omdat de carrière van Herman maar in 1 woord kan worden omschreven. Namelijk indrukwekkend. Ik vermeldde al de directeur van onze studiedienst, toen nog CEPES en partijvoorzitter. Maar hij was ook samen met Jean-Luc Dehaene de man die ons land de euro heeft binnengeleid als vicepremier en minister van Begroting. Hij was de wijze man tijdens vele kamerdebatten. Als kamervoorzitter, de premier van de rustige vastheid en tenslotte de eerste Europese president. Eerst door sommigen een gebrek aan charisma verweten, maar nadien geroemd als diegene die de standaard heeft gezet voor al wie na hem zal komen. Met de uitdagingen waar Europa voor staat, hoop ik dat uw voorbeeld inspirerend mag blijven werken. Mijn schoonmoeder die heeft een slogan dat ze aan mijn kinderen vaak zegt. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Wel, ik zou ze een beetje willen parafraseren. A speech a day keeps the EU-scepticism away. A speech a day. Ongeveer het gemiddelde van 1 speech per dag. Dat is, Herman, wat je nog vandaag de dag doet. 1 speech per dag over de noodzaak van Europa. 1 speech per dag over het hoe en het waarom. Het nut, de reden van Europa. En dat op een moment dat Europa onder druk staat. Kijk naar Nederland. Hebben dit soort van blijvend en authentiek getuigenis en engagement hard nodig. Ik wil u daar dan ook uitdrukkelijk voor bedanken. Mijn eerste ontmoeting met Herman van Rompuy weet ik nog goed. Het was 20 jaar geleden. Precies 20 jaar geleden. In 1996. Ik was licentiaatstudent in de politieke wetenschappen en maakte een verhandeling over het personalisme in de CVP. En de aanleiding van mijn verhandeling was een boek dat Leo Tindemans in 1993 had geschreven over het personalisme, getiteld De toekomst van een idee. Een van mijn professoren en later promotor Manu Gerard spoorde me aan om op basis van dat boekje een licentiaatsverhandeling te maken. Natuurlijk wat literatuuronderzoek, wat stukken in de archieven. Maar ik wilde ook een paar interviews doen. Niet te veel, maar toch enkele. Met bevoorrechte getuigen. Herman, je was op dat ogenblik vicepremier en minister van Begroting. En dat op een sleutelmoment in onze naoorlogse geschiedenis. Het was de tijd van het globaal plan, de Maastricht-normen. Na het lichten van de communautaire blokkering in 1993 met het Sint-Michielsakkoord was de tijd aangebroken voor sociaal-economisch beleid. Samen met Jean-Luc Dehaene, jouw jarenlange compagnon de route, bracht je ons land in stelling om toe te treden tot de euro. Jullie voerden een beleid dat moed vroeg. Ik denk zelfs dat ik mag spreken van het moedige midden. De begroting op orde zetten, hervormen, een nieuw indexsysteem invoeren. En dat alles met socialistische partijen. Het was een beleid dat op dat ogenblik de mensen niet meteen euforisch stemde. Maar het was wel nodig om perspectief te creëren op langere termijn. En het werkte. De begroting geraakte op orde. En België mocht toetreden tot de euro. Om het met de woorden van de Duitse president Joachim Gauck te zeggen: je hebt je toen niet laten leiden door de angst, maar door de moed en daardoor opnieuw perspectief en hoop gegeven. In de politiek heb je hoopgevers en hoopzoekers. Hoopzoekers zijn mensen die zelf zoekende zijn en daar in hun politieke en maatschappelijke actie anderen bij betrekken. Vaak vinden ze zichzelf of hun partij ook wel een paar keer uit. Ik zal geen namen noemen. Daarnaast heb je hoopgevers. Zo iemand is Herman van Rompuy. Een partij heeft het nood aan hoopgevers en aan lange termijn denken. Ook en misschien zelfs vooral wanneer je in regeringen vertegenwoordigd bent. Want het is eigen aan regeren om consensus te zoeken. Uiteraard consensus die dicht bij ons programma ligt, maar toch. Het risico bestaat altijd dat je je laat leiden door de drukte van de dag, de agenda's, datgene wat op de politieke actualiteit staat, en dat de vraag naar de richting, de lange termijn uitdagingen, de nieuwe fenomenen die opduiken, visies en verwachtingen die evolueren, mensen die ook veranderen, welke antwoorden daarop gegeven moeten worden. Een politieke partij is een politieke beweging en die heeft altijd nodig aan een kompas. Mensen moeten zich daar altijd bewust van blijven. En dat is een van de redenen waarom dat we deze lezing ook vandaag willen starten. Niet alleen deze lezing. Dat is ook de reden waarom dat we congressen organiseren, zoals 3 jaar geleden het UNESCO-congres. En zoals we nu als partij opnieuw voor dezelfde uitdaging staan tegen het einde van dit jaar om het nieuwe wijkcongres vorm te geven. Dames en heren, vandaag hebben we Jeremy Rifkin in ons midden. The man we have invited today has some interesting things to tell about those changes. His name is Jeremy Rifkin, the renowned economist and writer. In his talk, he will discuss his latest book, The Zero Marginal Cost Society. It offers an inspiring view on the future in this rapidly evolving world. Therefore, it's probably on the list of the most read books of many political leaders. Toen ik samen met Herman sprak over deze lezing en over een mogelijke spreker, toen kwamen we al snel op de naam van Jeremy Rifkin. En als een Europees president had Herman beter dan wie ook zicht op wat er gebeurde in de wereld, de bijzondere mensen die er rondlopen en mogelijke sprekers om ons te inspireren. Why Jeremy Rifkin? I could simply say that he has been an advisor of both President Obama and the European Commission. And I even read that China wants to rely on his experience as well. But we are not looking for someone with a big network or someone who works with the world's greatest leaders. We are looking for someone to inspire us, someone who has an idea and visions that can really makes a difference. Because that is where it connects to our story. Ik sprak daarnet al over de grote veranderingen die we meemaken. Volgens Jeremy Rifkin kunnen nieuwe evoluties een eindpunt betekenen voor ons oude economische model. Een model met strikte scheiding tussen producent en consument, tussen werkgever en tussen werknemer. En dat zal bepalend zijn, ook voor ons nieuwe wij, de richting die we als partij willen bewandelen. En wat is hierbij ook de rol van het middenveld? Is er nog wel een rol voor het middenveld? Wat ons betreft is dat volmondig ja. Maar die rol die zal anders zijn en daarom niet minder impactvol. Blijven we bij een overheid die zich inzet op de ondersteuning van het gezin of trekken we het breder naar iedereen die duurzaam zorgt voor iemand anders? Hoe gaan we om met de steeds groeiende rol en plaats die de deeleconomie krijgt en die de bestaande verhoudingen overhoop dreigt te halen? Het zijn vragen die we de volgende maanden op ons congres zullen beantwoorden. En ik hoop dat de antwoorden die Jeremy Rifkin vandaag zal geven daarbij zullen kunnen helpen. Met deze eerste editie tonen we meteen aan wat we willen bereiken met de Herman van Rompuy-lezing. Een topspreker met een stevig verhaal die onze partij aan het denken zet, die jullie aan het denken zet. Een omschrijving die ook perfect op Herman zelf van toepassing is. We willen het daarbij niet laten. Het is de bedoeling om jaarlijks deze lezing te organiseren. Een nieuwe vaste CD&V-afspraak voor onze leden en voor de buitenwereld. Ik hoop dat u dat na vanavond samen met mij wil ondersteunen. Ik wens u een inspirerende avond. Dank u wel.
He's American, but he wrote a book about the European dream. He wrote about the end of work, and now, more than 20 years after the publication, we see lots of things happening as he described them now, more than 20 years ago. His book, The Third Industrial Revolution, it was mentioned, very influential. German energy policy today wouldn't be what it is without his advice. As Wouter Baker said, all the way to China, Prime Minister Li Keqiang is reported to have read the book and recommended it to top officials in China. And actually, Jeremy Rifkin is quite optimistic about what he sees happening also in China. He's written about the empathic society, empathie, heel belangrijk in alles wat hij schrijft. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Rifkin.
Good evening, everyone. A pleasure to be with you today, and especially let me say what a personal honor and privilege it is to be here at the first presentation of a Herman Van Rompuy lecture. You remember the wonderful lunch we had at the beginning of your presidency. It was 2 or 3 hours. I know your son was there. We had a lot of folks there, and we covered topics across all the disciplines. It was really a stimulating experience. But let me say, as an American who spends time in Europe, you are so fortunate to have Herman as your first president and have him represent you on the world stage. And the world was fortunate to have him as the first president of Europe to show what it means to raise a high bar for statesmanship. So it's a real honor to be here with you tonight, and a pleasure, for sure. Let me start, however, on a somber note tonight. I hope it'll end up being a liberating reflection. You'll have to judge. Now, first of all, I have a ground rule. You're going to have to put your cell phones away, put your iPads away. I know you're having withdrawal symptoms right now. I know you're starting to get the jitters. Put it all away. Okay. GDP is slowing all over the world, every region. And the reason is productivity is declining all over the world for 20 years. The result, unemployment's high everywhere, and nowhere more so than among the young millennials who are struggling to get into the workforce. Our economists tell us we can look forward to 20 more years of slowing growth. And here's the reality at the end of 2 industrial revolutions over 2 centuries. Half the human race has been pulled up. We're all better off today than we were before this experiment in modern life. But what about the other half? Here's the sad reality. The 62 wealthiest human beings in the world today, we could put them in this little section of the room. Their combined wealth now equals the accumulated wealth of 1/2 the human beings living on Earth, 3.5 billion people. There's something so utterly dysfunctional about the way we're organizing economic life as a human family. And now this extended global economic crisis is compounded by a much more serious crisis, an environmental crisis. We have 2 industrial revolutions. The quality of life increased, but we're paying the bill now. We have exhumed and put into the atmosphere massive amounts of carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide, and we're now blocking the sun's heat from getting off the earth. We are in real-time climate change now. No more models, no more speculation. And what's critical to understand about climate change is never explained. I think if we explained it, the human race would be justifiably terrified, as I am, and mobilized as we should be. Climate change changes the water cycles of the earth. That's what this is all about. It's never explained. We're the watery planet. We go to other planets with our satellites. What's the first thing we want to know? Is there water? No water, not interested. All of life depends on water here. Our ecosystems have developed over millions of years based on the cloud covers and water cycles of the earth. Here's the problem. For every 1 degree that the temperature goes up on this planet from industrial-induced global warming emissions, for every 1 degree the temperature goes up, the atmosphere is sucking up 7% more precipitation from the ground. The heat is forcing that precipitation up there, and the result is we're getting more violent but infrequent water events. We're getting more blockbuster winter snows. We had 8 feet in Boston a year ago. That's the new normal in places. We're getting more violent spring floods everywhere. Last year in the Carolinas, we had a flood. They said, well, this flood's once in 1,000 years. Now the new normal, flooding everywhere. We're getting more prolonged summer droughts. We're out of water in California. They're out of water in Pakistan. They're experiencing droughts in Syria, which led all the farmers to move to the cities, the insurrection, the refugee crisis, ISIS, and the rest is history with the refugees coming to Europe. My wife and I were in British Columbia last summer. We had planned this vacation for a year. We're coming in. The pilot says on the way in, smoke coming in. I thought he meant fog. No, he meant smoke. We got to our hotel, and in the hotel, all the corridors full of smoke because all summer long last year, from British Columbia through California, wildfires everywhere, millions of acres destroyed. That's the new normal. And now, hurricanes, tsunamis, and typhoons that we've never seen before. The most powerful typhoon in history hits the Philippines last year. If you watch the news, 2 journal articles came out, one in Nature and one in the Science journal. Science, these are our premier journals. It's absolutely frightening. In the last few weeks, front page New York Times. We now have new studies that show that the Greenland ice is melting in the Arctic much faster than we had projected in the models. And now Antarctica is melting much faster than we projected in the models. The fresh water is going into the water currents. It's changing the water currents. It's changing the water cycle. We are in a runaway exponential curve of the water cycles of the earth, and they're saying we will see storms unprecedented since we've been on this planet, and we're going to see entire infrastructure disrupted. And this is happening not in 2 centuries from now, over the next 6 decades. So I want every parent and grandparent in the room to listen to what I'm saying here. Our scientists tell us that we are now in the 6th extinction event of life on Earth. We have had 5 mass extinction events in 450 million years, well before humans were here. And each time, there was a turning point in the chemistry of the planet and really quick die out. And each time, 10 million years or more to recover the biodiversity we lost. We are now in the 6th extinction event. This is being chronicled. This is not a model. Our scientists tell us we could lose over half the species of life that inhabit this oasis in the universe in the next 7 or 8 decades. We don't know if our species can survive this storm. It's here. It's in the house, not at the door. And as my wife says, we're not grasping the enormity of this moment. We are asleep. Even if we acknowledge this, we're going on as business as usual with a little greenwashing. 99.5% of all the species of life that have ever been on Earth have come and gone. Those are not good odds. It's hard to say this to a parent, a grandparent, or a young millennial in this room, but I honestly don't know if our species will survive as we know it and civilization as we've come to think of it, really, in the next 6, 7 decades. So what do? We have a global economic crisis that's worsening, and now it's given rise to climate change, which now threatens our survival and the survival of our fellow creatures in this little biosphere called Earth. We need a new economic vision for the world, and it has to be compelling. We need an economic game plan for that vision, and it has to be deliverable quickly everywhere in the developing and industrial world. We have to be off a carbon civilization, and we've got 4 decades to do this. If we have any hope of mitigating the worst excesses that'll lead us to the abyss, because we're now already in it, we can't come back. So we have to step back and ask the question, how do the great economic revolutions in history, the paradigm shifts, how do they occur? If we know how these economic paradigm shifts occur, we get a roadmap here in Belgium and here in the EU and in the world, and we'll get a compass to move us quickly on a path and a new journey to hopefully replenish and reflourish this earth and let future generations have their moment here. There have been at least 7 major economic paradigm shifts in history. They share a common denominator, which is quite interesting anthropologically, and that is at a certain moment of time, 3 defining technologies emerge and they converge to create what we call in engineering a general purpose technology platform. That's a fancy way of saying an infrastructure that fundamentally transforms the way we manage, power, and move economic activity. What are those 3 defining technologies that appear infrequently in history? Number 1, new communication technologies that allow us to more efficiently manage our economic activity. Number 2, new sources of energy to allow us to more efficiently power the economic activity. And number 3, new modes of transportation to more efficiently allow us to move the economic activity. When communication revolutions converge with new energy regimes and new modes of transportation, logistics, and mobility, it changes the way we manage power and move economic life. It changes our spatial temporal orientation. It changes the way we organize society. It changes governance. Let me give you a couple examples. 19th century, first industrial revolution, the Brits. In Britain, they move us from manual printing, pretty slow, to steam power printing, pretty fast. So we could mass produce print cheaply for managing communication. Big leap forward. Then the Brits laid out a telegraph system in the second half of that 19th century. Steam power printing and the telegraph then converged with a new source of energy in Britain called coal, cheap coal. And then the Brits invented the steam engine to harvest the coal. And then, this is ingenious, they put the steam engine on rails, locomotives, national railways, transportation logistics, to manage power and move economic life, created urban industrial society. The rest is history. Second industrial revolution in the United States, 20th century, centralized electricity matures with a telephone. We think the internet's a big deal, my Lord. Telephone's a big deal. Instant communication, speed of light across the world. The telephone, later radio and television, converged those communication technologies with a new energy source in the US, cheap Texas oil. And then Henry Ford borrowed the Daimler internal combustion engine, and he put everyone on the road with cheap cars, buses, and trucks. Communication, energy, transport, manage power and move economic life, second industrial revolution. That second industrial revolution took the whole world through the 20th century, and it peaked in July 2008. If you remember that month, Brent crude oil hit 147 a barrel that month on world markets, and the entire global economy shut down, complete silence. That was the economic earthquake The collapse of the financial market 60 days later, that was the aftershock. And the reason that was the earthquake is the whole civilization relies on carbon. If we survive this moment in time, and our future generations look back on us, they will say, oh yes, they were the carbon people. We had the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. They exhumed the carbon deposits of the Carboniferous Age and built a short-lived, dangerous civilization. Fertilizers, pesticides, construction materials, most of our pharmaceutical products, synthetic fiber, power, transport, heat, and light. I could go on and on. It's all made out of moved by carbon. So when the price of Brent crude goes over around 90 a barrel, no surprise, all the other prices started going up. When Brent crude hits around 115 a barrel, purchasing power starts to slow. So in 2009, oil goes down to 50 a barrel because there's no economic activity. And guess what? 2010, we start regrowing the inventories. The price of oil starts to go up at 117 a barrel, 116 a barrel. In 2014, purchasing power slows again. This is a convulsive sunset. It's growth, shutdown, growth, shutdown. Now, why is oil 30 a barrel now? Because now the fossil fuel industry is fighting among themselves during the sunset. It's survival. So OPEC keeps the oil spigot on, puts a lot of oil out to kill off shale gas and tar sand, because these are exotic fossil fuels. Try to imagine how pathetic this is, that we're trying to actually get oil out of sand or fracking under the ground. That shows you where we are. So what's happened is OPEC has wiped out shale gas and tar sand. This big idea of energy independence in the US and Canada, it's over. They're all going bankrupt right now. Just Google it up. It's gone. And so today, OPEC's saying we're going to now regulate the oil again. Then the oil prices go up. It's clear that we're sunsetting the second industrial revolution and that we now have to address climate change. So what happens from here on in? Let me share an anecdote with you. When Angela Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the first couple of weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy and create jobs on her watch. When I got to Berlin, the first question I asked the new Chancellor is, Madam Chancellor, how do you grow the German economy or the EU economy when your businesses are plugged in to a second industrial revolution infrastructure of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear power, internal combustion, road, rail, water, and air transport, and that infrastructure they plug into to manage power and move their value chains peaked in its productivity over 20 years ago, and nothing's changed. Now, you know, at dinner, Herman, we were talking about productivity, and I said I'd bring this up. We have a big raging debate going on among economists. They can't understand why productivity is declining. We have all these killer new products. How's it declining? The reason they don't understand why productivity is declining, which is crucial to our advance, is there's a dirty little secret in economics that no economist wants to talk about. They're ashamed of it. And that is, what is the nature of productivity? You would think that would be central to the discipline. We used to believe there are two factors in productivity: better machines, better workers. But when Robert Solow won the Nobel Prize for economic growth theory in the mid-1980s, he let the little secret out of the bag. He said, well, when we look at every single year of the second industrial revolution, we have a problem. Better machines and better workers only account for 14% of all the productivity. Where's the other 86% come from? Don't know. This is called the Solow residual. Moses Abramowitz, former head of the American Economic Association, said, this is a measure of our ignorance. Are you shocked? How could they not know this? The reason they don't know, and this is important to take with you, so bear with me, when economics was penned as a discipline in the late 1700s during the Enlightenment, all the new economists, philosophers wanted to borrow Newton's physics as metaphor because Newton seemed to explain all the mysteries of the universe. So for example, you know Newton's law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction? Adam Smith borrowed that metaphor for his invisible hand of supply and demand. Whatever happens in supply, there's an equal and opposite reaction in demand. Newton's law, a body in motion stays in motion unless disrupted by an outside force. Baptists say the great French economists borrowed that metaphor to suggest supply will stimulate demand, which will generate supply, which will stimulate demand onward and upward unless disrupted. The only thing wrong with framing all of economic theory in the gate of Newton's physics Newton's physics has absolutely nothing to do with economics. Nothing. Zero. Economics is based on the same laws that govern the universe, govern the solar system, govern the biosphere, and govern our economy and everything you and I do today. Those laws are the first and second laws of energy, the laws of thermodynamics. They were discovered by chemists in the late 19th century when they were looking at energy flows in machines. Here are those laws. The first law of energy says all the energy in the universe is constant since the Big Bang. Nothing's been created or destroyed since. That was it. One-time event. That's the conservation law. But the second law of energy or thermodynamics says, yes, whatever's here has been here since the Big Bang, but energy changes form every moment, but only in one direction, from hot to cooled off, from concentrated to dispersed in the galaxies, and from order to disorder. Entropy is a measure of the unavailable energy. I wrote a book some of you oldsters may remember in 1980, introducing this. Others came before me. So what does this mean? We take available energy out of this planet. It could be a rare earth. You have 30 little rare granules of earth in your smartphone. They've been here since we blew off the sun, you know, as we developed in this planet. We have rare earths. We have metallic ore. We have fossil fuels. We take them out of nature. And then we take them across our value chains. We extract them. We move them. We store these resources. Then we make goods and services out of them. We consume them. We recycle them back to nature. At every step of conversion of nature's available energy, material energy and gas and liquid form, at every step of conversion, we have to embed energy into the product or service at each step of its track across the value chain. But in the process, some of that energy is lost. In economics, we call this aggregate efficiency, the ratio of the potential work versus the actual useful work you get. This happens in nature. If you see a lion tracking an antelope and killing it, only 10 to 20% of the total energy in that antelope ever gets embedded in the lion. The rest is heat lost in the conversion. You with me? That's its aggregate efficiency. So what does this have to do with my conversation with the Chancellor of Germany? She is a physicist. And what I said, the United States started the second industrial revolution with 3% aggregate efficiency, 97% lost in every conversion. By 1990, the US got up to 14% aggregate efficiency, and nothing's changed. Germany got up to 18.5% aggregate efficiency across its value chains in the 1990s. Nothing's changed. And not surprising, Japan led the world at 20% aggregate efficiency in the 1990s. Nothing's changed. A new generation of economists trained in physics have gone back and they've looked at every year of the Industrial Revolution. They factored in better machines, better workers, and one more thing, aggregate efficiency. And they now see that accounts for most of the rest of productivity. Every engineer in this room could have told you this. Every chemist in this room, every biologist in this room, every architect in this room, because you all studied thermodynamics before at the beginning of your discipline. I teach in the oldest business school in the world, the Wharton School. I've been there since 1963 as a student. And I've taught the Advanced Management Corporate Program for 15 years. And guess what? Not a single one of my colleagues there or any other business school in the world requires that you learn the basic laws of energy that govern economic activity. Not a single business school. That's why they don't understand productivity. So, what I said that day to the Chancellor, you're stuck at about 18% aggregate efficiency and you never get higher than this, Japan 20, that's about it. We're not going to get anything more out of the platform. And that first day, I introduced with her a third industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution was steam power. The second was analog electricity. The third is digital. And by the way, there is no fourth industrial revolution, this hype that's coming from some of the companies. Maybe if we get to quantum physics, there will be. The digital revolution started with robotics and software, and now it's maturing with what I'm about to talk to you about. When I said to the Chancellor, the communication internet has matured. It's been 25 years since the World Wide Web. It's now converging with a digitalized renewable energy internet and a digitalized, automated GPS and soon driverless road, rail, water, and air transportation internet to create three internets to manage, power, and move economic life. These three internets are one internet. communication, energy, and transport, and they ride on top of a platform called the Internet of Things. We're putting sensors across all of the society and even nature to monitor activity and send it back to these three internets that are emerging. We have sensors in the agricultural fields, in factories, in retail stores, in smart homes, smart vehicles, in warehouses. They're starting to send big data back. By 2030, we will have ubiquitous interconnectivity. We are creating an external prothesis of the nervous system of the human race, but this is distributed. Because actually, our system is not as centralized either. The real body is a distributed nervous system. On the upside, this is a huge potential leap forward for humanity because now the whole human race, with cheap technology, smartphones, can access each other for almost free and have a transparent picture of all the economic data going in the world if it stays network neutral. This suggests the human family can engage each other directly and eliminate all the middlemen and vertically integrated organizations that led us to the 1% and 99% in the first two industrial revolutions. But the moment we think about how special this is, because we can begin to think as a human family and actually engage each other across all the old boundaries and eliminate time and space, we immediately get chilled by the prospect. And I as well. What about instant connectivity of everybody? How do we protect network neutrality? How do we make sure governments don't purloin this for political purposes or monopoly companies for commercial ends? How do we protect our privacy when everyone's connected? How do we assure data security in this interconnected world? How do we prevent cybercrime, cyber terrorism, and the complete disruption of the system and its breakdown? These are the dark net issues that are going to enjoin the next three generations here in the EU and around the world. This is the politics of the next three generations. But assuming for the sake this evening we can address this, and I spent a lot of time in the zero marginal cost society, endless time on this dark net. But let's assume we can address this, we can muddle through this. Here's the benefit of this new third industrial revolution, the digital revolution. Let's say you have a small and medium-sized enterprise here in Brussels, in Belgium, or you have a big company, or a cooperative, or a nonprofit. You can go up on this emerging Internet of Things platform that's now here, it's starting, and you can cut your big data on your value chain out from the rest of the noise, because all of that data is coming through there. Then you can take the big data on your value chain that you care about and mine it with your own analytics. Create your own algorithms and apps so that you can dramatically increase your aggregate efficiency at every step of conversion on your value chain. And by doing so, dramatically increase your productivity. Dramatically reduce your ecological footprint because we're getting more out of less conversion using less of the earth each time. And dramatically plunge your marginal cost. So you can stay competitive in an extremely streamlined, smart global economy. Some of those marginal costs are already going to zero marginal cost society, the title of the book. And this is giving rise to a new phenomenon called the sharing economy. Let's put this sharing economy into perspective because we're all hearing about it. Well, this was a big surprise. Big surprise, although I wrote a book on it in 2001 called The Age of Access. My colleague said, there you go again, this is never going to happen. I said, we're going to move from ownership to access. It's not being clairvoyant. Any anthropologist could smell these things. All you have to do is look. But we're so stuck with old categories, we can't think of what's around us. Capitalism has given birth to a little baby. We didn't think this mature system had it in it. This little progeny is called the sharing economy. It's flourishing alongside its capitalist parent. And like any parent-child relationships, it's kind of unformed. The parent's got to have to nurture this little baby, let it grow, let it create an identity and a presence. But on the other hand, if you're a parent or a child, you understand that sometimes the relationship's a little cloudy. Sometimes the parent wants the child to be a reflection of the parent and absorb them. Sometimes the child wants to be their own independent being. So what's happening here is that we're seeing the emergence of the first new economic system on the world stage since capitalism and socialism in the 19th century. Capitalism's not going to disappear, but it's not going to be the exclusive arbiter of economic life in the next 35 years, not on these curves. It's going to have to stand side by side with a grown-up child that's now an adult, and you're going to have two systems in place. It's already happening. Any millennial in this room knows this. Part of the day you're in a market. You're producing goods and services. You have sellers and you have buyers and you have owners and you have workers, and you're making a margin and creating a profit, correct? Part of the day, you're in the sharing economy. And you're producing and sharing all sorts of goods and services at zero marginal cost. There's no margin left, and it's free, and you're distributing it to each other in the sharing economy. Let me give an example of where we're headed. The first of the three internets is in. The communication internet has matured, and zero marginal cost brought on by digitalization has disrupted entire industries in 15 years. We have 3 billion people now who are prosumers. We still have sellers, buyers, owners, and workers, as I said. But we have now 3 billion prosumers who are providers and users, not sellers and buyers. And they're producing all sorts of virtual goods for each other at zero marginal cost beyond the market and disrupting whole industries. The music industry. We've got millions of people tonight, while I'm talking to you, who are actually taking cheap little digital technology with studio quality, and they're producing music. Like that Korean performance guy. Remember that guy in Korea? Performance artist? And he had a little cheap technology, did a little song and dance, and he was able to distribute that music. The marginal cost was zero, and 1 billion people came to his website. We have millions of people every hour or so are producing their own YouTube videos. Open source, no intellectual property, sharing it up there on the web, zero marginal cost. If you take your little smartphone, take a little video, it goes viral, everybody sees it's free. We have millions of young people producing their own social media, their own news blogs. And here's the most improbable event, Jimmy Wales. Who would have ever thought Wikipedia could work? Millions and millions of people freely giving their talent to construct the knowledge of the world, democratizing the knowledge of the world, freely giving their talent. Now, this can't be, because Adam Smith said each individual only pursues their self-interest and not the interest of the community, doesn't even look at the community. But in pursuing the self-interest, the community benefits. So what's wrong with all these people who are contributing their talent and spending time checking each other's accuracy and creating the knowledge of the world? Maybe we misjudged human nature. Maybe the competitive, predatory, utilitarian, pleasure-seeking, libidinal drives are secondary. If the first drives are not met, which is to be social, to give freely, to enjoy the ability to help the communities we're in. And I know when we become old and gray, that's the only thing that counts when we look back on our life. The empathic moments, the moments of giving, the moments of transcending ourselves, not the profit in the market. So whole industries have been disrupted. The music industry shrunk, television's declined, newspapers have gone out of business, and my new book was put out on the Pirate Bays before we could publish in our languages, and they were ranking it well before Amazon could even put it on the screen. You're not going to beat this. This is a technology revolution. Now, while these industries were disrupted, entire new enterprises emerged. Some profit, like Google, some non-profit, like Wikipedia, which is the 6th largest website in the world, and certainly as important to our knowledge as Google, and that's non-profit. But we also have thousands of other social enterprises who have created the platforms, used the analytics, created the algorithms, the apps, the connections, and they're flourishing. It's a disruptive model. But we thought there'd be a firewall here, and while the zero marginal cost phenomena brought on by digitalization and communication would not frost the firewall into the physical world of atoms. What I'm saying in the zero marginal cost society is that Internet of Things breaks the firewall down. It's gone. We have now millions of people who are producing their own solar and wind electricity at zero marginal cost tonight. We have millions of young people who are in car sharing services that are soon going to be electric, fuel cell, and driverless, and the costs are going to plummet. It's already starting. Let's go back to Germany. What's happened in the 10 years since the meeting with the Chancellor? We are now at 32% of all the electricity in Germany is now solar and wind. We'll be 40% before 2020. We'll be 100% way before 2040. It's moving quick. And what's interesting is the fixed cost of this solar and wind technologies is on an exponential curve just like computing. When I was a child in the 1950s, computers cost millions of dollars. And the chairman of IBM said, we'll need 7 computers, maybe 7. We didn't anticipate the Intel chip and exponential curves. And Moore's law, where Moore, the head of Intel, found that they were doubling the capacity on the chip every 2 years and halving the cost. And here we are now. China has a smartphone for $25. with more computing power than sent our astronauts to the moon. And if you're making $2 a day or almost nothing in the Amazon rainforest, you're going to have the smartphone, you already have the cell phone. Everyone's going to be connected. Everyone's going to be connected. And right now, power and utility companies in my group, I don't know if you know this, they're quietly buying up long-term 20-year contracts for solar and wind electricity right now at 4 cents a kilowatt hour, below all fossil fuels and nuclear. And the Berkeley Federal Government Labs in the US last week, Herman said, they're now producing solar and wind at between 2.5 and 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour. It's over. The big problem, and this is what's happening behind the scenes that you're not privy to, and it isn't even being discussed at the EU level yet, is stranded assets. The nuclear industry, fossil fuel industry has trillions of dollars of stranded assets that cannot compete with the exponential curve I've just met. And the question is, will this be the next bubble after the subprime? Who's going to pay for the stranded assets? So, what's happening in Germany? Once you pay for the fixed cost, and those costs of the technologies are plummeting, you're going to have solar in paint, glass, everywhere, wind. The marginal cost of that energy today is near zero. You know what? The sun has not sent us a bill. The wind hasn't invoiced us, nor is the geothermal heat. What I'm suggesting is, imagine in Germany, little Denmark's doing this, which shows that even a country of 3 million, 2 million people can do this. What happens when the communication internet joins with the renewable energy internet, and German businesses plug into that platform, and in every single conversion on their value chains, they got zero marginal cost energy in the managing, powering, and moving of their value chains. And that's a disruption. So what's happened? Who's producing all this new electricity? We have 4 major power companies in Germany: EnBW, RWE, E.ON, and Vattenfall. These were invincible, vertically integrated global power company giants. We thought they were untouchable, and what's happened to them in 10 years? Same thing that happened in the music industry: newspapers, magazines, book publishing. Millions of small players came together and created electricity cooperatives: farmers, small businesses, neighborhoods. Every one of them got low interest loans from the banks because the banks knew they'd pay back by the premium energy they were selling back to the grid. No one was turned down. You didn't need the government. They just put in the feed-in tariff. And even the feed-in tariff, which allowed you premium, we got to scale so quick, we're now moving the feed-in tariff out. It only took us 10 years to get in and get out of the tariff. The nuclear and fossil fuel industry has hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies each year in their mature industries. We're getting out in less than 10 because we're at parity. We're moving there really quickly. So the electricity is being produced by millions of small players. This is power to the people. I mean this literally and figuratively. The big 4 power companies are producing less than 7% of the energy, and they're out of the game. But they now might not be out of the business of energy. The reason they're out of the game, and to their credit, they were the most efficient mechanisms for organizing centralized energy that required massive capital. So you had to create these giant vertically integrated organizations, whether you were in the Soviet Union or the United States, to move this energy. And they were the most efficient. They did a good job in that sense. But the new energies are everywhere, and they're ubiquitous. The sun is everywhere. You got to collect it everywhere. The wind, you have to collect it where it is. The geothermal heat, it requires lateral economies of scale and cooperatives, not vertically integrated organizations. How's a power company going to capture all that? It's captured by the infrastructure where people live and work. So does this mean this is the end of the power industry? No, not necessarily, but they have to change their business model, and they have to be both in the second and the third industrial revolution simultaneously over 30 years to make the shift in a mindful, deliberate, careful way. It isn't either or tomorrow, it's how do you get from the old to the new over 30 years. So we had a debate, E.ON asked me to debate Chairman Tyson of E.ON, he's still there, 7 years ago in a neutral country, the Netherlands, and I introduced a new business model and said to him, you're still going to produce centralized energy, but the exponential curves are clear. We're moving toward everyone producing their own energy. Believe me, in 30 years from now, if we get any of this right, everyone with cheap technology like your smartphones going to be connected to that technology where they live and work, producing it, storing it, and sharing their lulls against surpluses and all across continents, if we get any of this right. So I said, for the power companies, your new role in the new business model is to sell less and less and less electricity. And Mr. Tyson said, how do we make money? I said, you set up partnerships with thousands of enterprises, And you help manage the energy flows on their value chains because you know how to manage energy. And you help them with their analytics, and you help them with their algorithms and their apps so they can dramatically increase their aggregate efficiency on their energy internet at every conversion on their value chains. In return for the increased productivity you help them get, those thousands of enterprises will share their productivity gains back with the power company. It's called performance contracts. We're doing it. So this year, E.ON, took them 7 years. They sold off, they did what we asked, finally, all these years later, sold off their nuclear and fossil fuel. They're moving into helping erect and manage the energy internet. But they're going to have a lot of players beside them, smart startups, ICT companies, logistics, everybody's going to get in the game. It's a race to see who's going to partner. And it's not just the EU. I had never done any work in China. I never haven't been to China. And I was quite shocked. Several winters ago, I actually thought this was a joke. I was up on Google. I love Google, actually. We got to make sure it doesn't become a global public monopoly. It's starting to look like a public utility. We're going to have to regulate these companies, let them stay private. They're going to get regulated. There's going to be political debate in the EU and all over the world. And we'll still get the best out of them. Let them be private. They're going to be regulated. So I'm up on Google. And I'm looking there, and it said the new premier of China, Premier Li, just came into office. He put out his official biography. He said he was a fan. He'd read the last book, Third Industrial Revolution, instructed the government to begin moving on these themes. Mindful, China lost out in the first industrial revolution. They were brutally occupied by European powers, America. They lost out on almost the second industrial revolution, came in the last 20 years during the sunset. They were determined to be among the leaders in a third industrial revolution. I have had many formal visits since that time with the leadership. I just came back last week from 2 weeks. Working with them on the 5-year plan. And the new 5-year plan incorporates the ideas that I'm laying out to you today in the 5-year plan. But to show you how fast they move, 11 weeks after the first visit that I had, the chairman of the national electricity grid, the state grid, which is the biggest in the world, said, well, we're going to put $82 billion right now in the next 4 years in digitalizing the electricity grid in China so millions of Chinese people can produce their own solar and wind, send it back to the grid. Watch Berlin, watch Brussels, watch Beijing. We're beginning to see a new relationship here. Watch Brussels, watch Beijing. The coming together of the communication internet with the energy internet for renewables gives rise to the automated GPS and soon driverless transportation logistics internet. Here's the rub. The automobile ownership literally created the second industrial revolution by automobiles. The problem with all the millennials, where are my millennials here under the age of 32? Raise your little hands there. Come on, up, up, up. Well, you have thrown us a curve. You're the problem. But you're also the solution. Because apparently you don't want to own automobiles anymore. That's old hat. That's grandma and grandpa, 2 cars sitting in the driveway, or 1 car at the office. 90% of the time it's doing nothing. You do not want ownership of the vehicle over time. You want access to mobility in real time, correct? And you're all car sharing. And this is all taken off in 45 years. And my wife and I saw this close up. We were at a little Ethiopian restaurant 2 years ago. We're looking out the window, and there's this smart young millennial couple, and the guy whips out his smartphone. We knew what he was doing. Boom, boom, boom. He went to the communication internet, car sharing website. That immediately transformed him to the transportation internet, GPS. GPS located a driver 90 seconds from the passengers. They whisked away, PayPal paid. Why would you ever want to own a car again? I'm saying this, we're not going to eliminate millions of cars tomorrow morning, but the exponential curve is clear, beginning with the millennials and your children and your grandchildren. I guarantee you, you're going to buy less cars and you're going to access in car sharing networks. This is the sharing economy. For every car shared, we're eliminating 15 cars from production right now. Now, some of you in the business community remember Larry Burns, the former executive vice president of General Motors till 5 years ago, and a heavyweight in transport and logistics. He's now a professor, University of Michigan. He did a study of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and he found right now this transportation internet with car sharing can eliminate 80% of the vehicles in that city right now with better mobility and cheaper. Now, let's extrapolate Larry's study. We got 1 billion cars, buses, and trucks in the world choking us in traffic. And they're the number 3 cause of global warming emissions. Number 1 is buildings. But in Germany, we have already retrofitted 2 million buildings and turned them into micro power plants. By the way, does anyone know what the number 2 cause of global warming emissions is? Buildings is 1, transport is 3. We spend all our time in public debate in the EU and China and the US on number 1 and 3. Does anyone know what the silent number 2 is that nobody wants to speak to? Huh? Yeah, cows, methane, beef production and consumption, and animal husbandry. I wrote a book on it called Beyond Beef in 1990. My colleagues said, oh my God, there again, you're telling me methane from animals? Well, we now know the science is in. Methane, nitrous oxide, CO2, it's methane. Even Al Gore doesn't want to talk about it because no one wants to offend the dietary habits of our people. If we can't, I'm really serious about this, if we can't move slightly down, I can't tell you how many environmental conferences I have and they're all serving hamburgers or beef every time. If we can't move down the food chain slightly to reorganize our diet and we prefer extinction, I'm really serious about this. This is really wrong. We can't even talk about this. But let's go to transport, number 3. We're going to eliminate, if Larry Burns is right, 80% of the vehicles in the world in the next 3 generations with car sharing. The other 200 million vehicles are going to be electric. China's putting out 5 million electric vehicles, Herman, in the next 5 years in the 5-year plan. 5 million. The other 200 million vehicles will be electric. They'll be fuel cell with hydrogen. The big 6 companies are coming out with the hydrogen cars in 2017. These cars are going to be electric. They're going to be fuel cell. They're going to be operated by near zero marginal cost renewable energy. And they're going to be 3D printed with recycled materials. The first car is partially printed. It's called the Stratus. It's an Italian car. And of course, it's drop dead beautiful. And you're not going to beat the Italians in design, all right, and high-end electronics. And guess what? These vehicles are going to be driverless. Road, rail, water, and air. China has just, at the Las Vegas Electronics Festival this year, introduced the air drone. There's no pilot. Picks you up and delivers you right now. Driverless vehicles are already here, and I'll give you a little inside story. But let me tailor it to this. Does this mean this is the end of transport companies? No. But they have to change their business model. They're still selling millions of vehicles in the second industrial revolution, but the curve is quickly moving toward access over ownership and eliminating 80% of them in 3 generations. So they have to now move to a new model. What is it? They can help other industries erect and manage the automated transportation logistics internet. And this is happening. I was with Daimler 3 or 4 weeks ago before the China trip. They asked me to come in. Daimler, the chairman of Daimler Trucks. We held a global press conference. And he's one of the 8 board of directors. And I laid out the same narrative I'm laying out here, and then he wowed the journalists. They put it on a bit, they darkened the screen, and they went to a live helicopter feed on the German expressways in real time. And there were 3 huge trucks, Daimler trucks, and he announced that Daimler had put sensors in hundreds of thousands of trucks that could monitor real-time data. Traffic flows, weather conditions, warehouses. They are mobile data centers now crossing the transport corridors, and their new business is logistics, helping to erect and manage the transportation logistics internet with big data, analytics, algorithms, and apps, so that any time you're using anything in the mobility sector, they can provide that for you. And these 3 trucks, they went into the cabs in live time, and the drivers waved, and the chairman of Daimler Trucks said, take your hands off the wheels and off the pedal. They went into automatic, and the drivers weren't drivers. They were software specialists in the vehicles. And the trucks started to platooning together as a mobile data center, like a train platooning across the expressways. That was 4 weeks ago. Everything I'm telling you tonight is being scaled. Nothing I'm telling you is in the land of science fiction. Some places are ahead of others, but every industry now, at least since the book came out, I'm having boardroom meetings every week. They're trying to figure out how to be in both these transitions at the same time if they're good businesses. If they're not, they're just not going to be here. This is the new reality that's emerging. And to understand this sharing economy, sharing the homes with Airbnb and couch surfing, sharing the cars, the best way to understand the psychological shift is toys. The modern commercial toy was invented in Ravensburg, Germany, this beautiful little medieval town a couple centuries ago. And this is the big shift in consciousness. Traditionally, a parent would bring home a toy for a 3-year-old daughter, and they would say, Santa Claus didn't get you this. That was Christmas. We bought you this toy. This is now your property. This is not your brother's toy. This is not your sister's toy. This is your toy. You're responsible. Take care of it. Remember this? Of course, the first thing you probably thought is, what did mom and dad say about my brother and sister? It's not their toy. Okay, status, power, negotiation. I'm never going to let them use this toy unless I get something in return. They're learning about property and markets. They're learning about status. There's nothing wrong with that, part of human reality. But now we have millennial parents going up on toy websites where there are thousands of shared toys, and they buy a one-time subscription, then they can get any toy in any age group. They're bringing the toy home to the little girl, and they're saying, another little girl enjoyed this toy. She had a lot of fun with it. She took good care of it because she knew one day you'd want to have fun with the toy. And you'll want to have a good time with the toy, take care of it, because one day another little child's going to play with a toy. The child's now learning the toy's not a possession. It's not a status symbol. It's not negotiation of power. It's an access to an experience in time, and then it's redistributed to someone else. This is called the circular economy. This is the sharing economy. This is a shift in consciousness. I'd venture to say we're going to be in both worlds. Part of the time we'll be in markets. We'll have property. That's not going away. Part of the time we'll be in networks, and we'll be sharing goods and services with access so nothing goes to the landfill. We're going to have both. It's a good option. So how do we pay for this? When Prime Minister Renzi took over the rotating presidency, he asked me to join him in Venice to declare Digital Europe as a new journey. And then after that, I wrote a memorandum for President Juncker when he came in and his team on Digital Europe. It's not just 5G and Wi-Fi, big data. A lot of people still think it is here in Brussels. It's the coming together of the digital communication internet with the energy internet, the automated transport internet, the Internet of Things, the transformation of society. And so after I did that memorandum, Mr. Juncker got back to me personally, and he wrote me a letter, said, I looked at every word, every sentence. This is where we want to go. Let me introduce you to some of the vice presidents. We'll have a chat. And one of the first things that came up was, how do we pay for this? And I said, we have the money. The question is where we're doing with the money. For example, in 2012 in the EU, that was a bad year, and you know all these figures. We spent about $741 billion equivalent US dollars in 2012 on infrastructure in the EU. That's in a bad recession year. That's a lot of money. Every country does. The problem is not the money, it's where it's going. We're investing in infrastructure that's new old. New old. We're pouring it in a second industrial revolution infrastructure, centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel nuclear, internal combustion transport, and we can't get above 20% aggregate efficiency in any country in the world on that platform. So you can have all the new killer products like 3D printing, but if you plug into that platform, you don't get the productivity. So I said if we reprioritize our funding so some of it goes to the regions to build out, not just to maintain the second industrial revolution, to build out the third, we're there in 3 decades. Well, the EIB came to light. They said we're going to change our priorities, and we're going to make digitalized communication, digitalized energy and transport our priorities, as well as digitalized education and healthcare. Now, if you're a region and you want to apply for those funds, you develop an economic plan, so part of your infrastructure is moving to this third industrial revolution. What will this do for all the regions? Every industry is involved in this build-out. This is how we move the economy. It's going to require construction and real estate to retrofit all the buildings. It's going to require ICT, consumer electronics, transportation, logistics, manufacturing, the life sciences. They all have to be involved in the build-out. And it puts people back to work. It's true, I wrote the book, The End to Work, that we're moving to an automated society, but we have a reprieve of 2 generations left, one last surge of mass labor to build out this infrastructure. Robots aren't going to do this. We have to change Belgium. Let's take Belgium. We have to take the entire energy mix of Belgium and move it from fossil fuel nuclear to renewable energy. How do we're going to have to retrofit every single building in Belgium so that we can then make them efficient and then turn them into micro power generation. That keeps the construction and real estate industry going for 30 years, and you get paid back by the energy savings with energy service companies. You don't even need the government to do that. You get paid back by the energy savings. We have to take the electricity grid of Belgium, which is servo-mechanical, old, and dumb, and we have to make it digitalized and smart. Who's going to lay down the underground cable? Robots? Who's going to put in the advanced meters? Robots? Absolutely not. We have to take the transportation system in Belgium and move it from dumb to smart road, rail, water. Who's going to put in the charging stations across the infrastructure and the sensors? Robots aren't going to do that. AI is not going to do that. But once the infrastructure is in, we've got about 40 years left of this mass labor Once it's in, this economy is automated. It is smart, as I said in the end of work. It will run with small workforces. Then what happens to the workers? So these breathless new books are coming out saying, well, we'll give everyone a guaranteed income to do nothing. Come on. You really think that's going to happen? Everyone's going to sit around and do nothing? Human beings need to have a reason to get up every morning, have a reason to be in life, to contribute to society. We're a social creature. So we know where the trend lines in employment are going if we just smell it. As we move this smart economy in and it's automated in the market, we're already seeing where the employment's going. It's heading to the nonprofit social economy because that's where you create social capital. Machines are just supplemental. No robot is going to sit and raise the minds of 2-year-olds in a child care center. Maybe the robot will bring the little food container in, but human beings have to then find ways with the little babies to let them grow and nurture. This is true in health and education and many other fields. And it turns out that this is the fastest growing sector, nonprofit, in 40 countries. It's 10% of our employment in the US. It's probably 13, 14, 15% in a lot of the European countries. And it's self-sustaining. It doesn't rely on government grants anymore, philanthropy, not since deregulation. Most of the nonprofits have fees for services. Over half the income is fees for services. If you're doing health care, you might put in a health care clinic, for example. So there are all sorts of options to move here. And what I would like to say in the end here is, first, the reason I wrote these books, these last few books, especially Zero Marginal Cost Society, this is the only plan I know that gives us any hope of addressing climate change if we have enough time in 4 decades around the planet. The technology just needs to be scaled. We talk about sustainability, but what it really is the ability to move towards zero marginal cost. We measure sustainability in terms of aggregate efficiency, the ratio of potential work to the actual useful work. How much work did you actually get embedded into what you're doing? How much was lost? So to the extent that we can use cheap technology, 7 billion people, to constantly increase our aggregate efficiency with our analytics and data in everything we do, it means that we are using less of the earth, and each time we're getting more out of it and less wasted. Then if what we produce is shared, share the vehicles, share the homes, share the toys, we're in a circular economy, everything's distributed, we don't put anything on the landfill. We go to the energy internet, and the human race should be producing energy everywhere, and where there are surpluses, you share them against lulls across continents and energy internets. China's announced a global energy internet initiative 2 weeks ago. And if we go to the automated GPS driverless transport internet, we're going to eliminate 80% of the materials of the earth we used. Having said this, let me say I'm not a futurist, I'm not a technological optimist. If you've read my stuff, I'm often very critical, and I'm certainly not utopian. I don't believe in utopias. But I would say this, the technology is not enough. This is what I want to leave you with. Technology is not fate, it's just an enabling device, and we're lucky we've got the scale-up possibilities. But the real key, we will not beat climate change, and we will not have civilization survive if we don't have a shift in consciousness to accompany the technology. I grew up in a geopolitical world. Post-Westphalia, the nation state, each individual is a sovereign agent who pursues their own autonomous agent against other sovereign individuals who pursue their own autonomous interests, and we compete in the marketplace. But our governments are also sovereigns. They represent our autonomous sovereign interests, and they're sovereigns against other nations and compete in the marketplace and the battlefield for scarce resources in a zero-sum game. Do I have this right? Is that the way the world works? If that is the consciousness we are now taking into this century, can anybody tell me how we will address climate change? We are beginning to see a shift, just beginning, and I don't want to play too much on this, from geopolitics to biosphere consciousness. Biosphere is the sheath, it's only 19 kilometers from the stratosphere to the oceans, where all of life interacts with the chemicals of the planet to maintain this amazing experience in the universe. We have kids coming home now. This is happening all over, and I'm sure you can see this in your own families, and the little kids, 12-year-olds, are saying to their dad, "Why are you using so much water when you're shaving?" They're saying to their parents, "Why has that Philips TV red light been on for 3 months in that room? No one stepped in there to watch the TV, wasting the electricity. Why do we have 2 cars? Can't we car share one?" And the one I'm particularly fond of, and I hope there's some in your family, we got kids coming home, and I'm sure it's here in Belgium, and they're saying to their parents, where'd this steak or hamburger come from? Any of us have this experience here in Belgium yet? Huh? Nobody? Nobody in Belgium has had this? Wow, there's one. Thank God you saved Belgium. So the kids are saying, did this hamburger come from a rainforest, because we're knocking out a lot of the rainforest for 3 inches of topsoil to graze the little cow for the burger? And if it came from the rainforest and they had to destroy the trees to graze the cow, the kids understand there are rare species of plant and animal life that only live in those tree canopies. They go extinct. And if the trees are raised to graze the cow for the hamburger, the trees aren't there anymore. They can't absorb CO2 from industrial CO2 emissions. That means the temperature of the planet goes up. That means the water cycles keep on the exponential curve. That means some farmer can't feed her kids because she has spring floods and summer droughts and wildfires. This is not academic. They're learning ecological footprint. They're learning there's no such thing as autonomy in this world. We are all intimately connected to this biosphere, and everything we do affects another human, another creature, another species, or the ecosystems. Like it or not, we are all intimately interconnected, and our well-being depends on the health of this biosphere, and now it's in crisis. So this is what I would say. I'm guardedly hopeful. I'm guardedly hopeful, but I'm not naive. What I've outlined tonight is possible, but we're running against a really dramatic clock and a runaway water cycle. I don't know if we can get there in time, but we have to believe we can, and we need 3 generations right there, steadfast, no business as usual, dedicated to this commitment to transform our technological infrastructure, our economic way of life, our forms of governance, and our way of thinking, so we can begin to live as a single human family, enmeshed with our fellow family, our fellow creatures in this evolutionary family in one biosphere. I think there's a chance to do this because we've proved over and over again we are ultimately the most social creature. We laid down the whole first industrial revolution in 50 years. We laid down the whole second industrial revolution in less than 50 years. Certainly we can do this again, and now our survival depends on it. So I'm hoping in the EU, as you know, the EU has led this. The EU has been at the forefront of creating a sustainable society. And now China has joined with the idea of an ecological civilization. And now the EU says we want digital Europe, and now China says we want internet plus China. It's the same thing. And now the EU and China are saying, how about one belt, one road? All the way from Shanghai to Rotterdam port. Why don't we get together between the EU and China, and we begin to find a way to share our best practices, share our technology, so that we can create an infrastructure, this digital infrastructure, from China to Europe, and help all of those failed states and those countries that missed out on the first, second industrial revolution come in to a new age where we share the biosphere of the planet. We learn to live together in peace. We create a biosphere reserve for the human race. This is possible. This isn't utopian. This is survival, but it's also the next journey for the human race. And we cannot get bogged down in the particulars of just fire after fire, day after day. We have to have some reflective time in the EU and the United States and China to begin to move this plan forward. And I'm hoping the EU, as it has been, will be the standard bearer, the flagship, the light, if you will, and the compass for our future. Thank you.
Dear Professor Jeremy Rifkin, the President of the Martens Center, President of my own party, Ministers, Minister of State, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends. First of all, I want to thank and congratulate again Professor Jeremy Rifkin for his message and his commitment. He is not only a man of science, he is first and foremost a man with a mission. And I had the privilege to meet him 5 years ago, and I'm as impressed today as I was at that time. I thank, of course, the Martens Center, as I said, and my own party organizing this lecture. I thank Mikuláš and Wouter for their very kind words. But they have to promise me not to repeat those flattering words each year. The challenge to my normality and my moderation would be too big. I will not embark on the themes Professor Rifkin dealt with. I will seize this opportunity to deliver my message on the current problems in our democracies, in our societies, in our member states, and in the Union. I will try to summarize my views in 7 slogans. And be sure it will not take the form of haikus. What do we have to do? What do we mostly need in order to get back more stable, more harmonious, more sustainable, and more happy societies and people? We need a combination of responsibility and solidarity. We need an eco-social market economy. We need ethical idealism and political realism at the same time. We need one civilization and many cultures. We need Europe as a space and Europe as a place. We need a Europe that is not too much focused on itself. Otherwise, it means losing itself. And we need to keep the club together. And let me add some more comments on those 7 topics, but in a very short way. And allow me also to speak my mother tongue. In de eurozonecrisis hadden wij dat tweespan van verantwoordelijkheid en van solidariteit. Elk land moest zijn begroting op orde zetten, zijn concurrentiekracht kwalitatief en kwantitatief herstellen en dat allemaal zo rechtvaardig mogelijk. Dat is het luik verantwoordelijkheid. En tegelijk moesten de sterke landen de zwakke landen met leningen helpen om over die moeilijke aanpassingsperiode te geraken. Dat is het luik solidariteit. En die 2 personalistische beginselen kan je terugvinden in de besluiten van mijn eerste Europese Raad, nu bijna 6 jaar geleden. Maar ook in de vluchtelingencrisis wordt aan elk land gevraagd, of werd aan elk land gevraagd, de Europese wetgeving toe te passen en oorlogsvluchtelingen humaan op te vangen. Dat is het luik verantwoordelijkheid. En er werd ook gevraagd die mensen overal, en dus niet alleen in enkele landen, een voorlopig verblijf te geven. Solidariteit. Die oefening is moeizamer verlopen dan ten tijde van de eurozonecrisis. En uiteindelijk is men toch enkele weken geleden akkoord gegaan over een gezamenlijk Europees crisisbeheer. Maar te veel was de slogan eigen grenzen eerst. En het is nog niet helemaal voorbij. Het tweede was de ecosociale markteconomie. Wel, die moet toelaten, en professor Rifkin heeft het daarnet heel eloquent gezegd, die moet toelaten, ik heb die ook zo letterlijk opgeschreven, hem nog niet gehoord hebbende, het menselijk ras te laten overleven door een effectief klimaatbeleid. En de tijd werkt tegen ons, zoals hij daarnet zelf gezegd heeft. De ecosociale markteconomie moet het rechtvaardigheidsdeficit bekampen en de Europese economie competitief houden op markten in de wereldeconomie. Ik ben nog altijd fier dat mijn laatste Europese Raad in oktober 2014 ging over het klimaatbeleid. Die ons heeft toegelaten in Parijs met 1 stem te spreken en de leider te zijn van tientallen landen, 80 landen, die ambitieuze doelstellingen hadden. Het was het omgekeerde van wat gebeurde in Kopenhagen in december 2009. Wij waren ook met de lange termijn bezig in die jaren. Beste vrienden, ik heb daar net gesproken over het rechtvaardigheidsdeficit. De sociale agenda domineert nu ook de Amerikaanse verkiezingen. Met 5% werkloosheidsgraad, full employment, is er een breuk in de samenleving. Wie een job heeft, is immers niet zeker hem te houden. En de vruchten van de economische groei zijn ongelijk verdeeld. En dat geeft vreemde resultaten, zowel bij republikeinen als bij democraten. Dat gevoel van ongelijkheid neemt ook in Europa toe. Veel minder in de landen met Rijnland-economieën als de onze. Maar toch, onze economieën moeten performant zijn. En daarom zijn ook onderwijs en onderzoek en ontwikkeling cruciaal. Wie bespaart, moet keuzes maken. En veel moet gaan naar onderwijs en R&D. Veel talent gaat nog verloren. Bij autochtonen en nog meer bij allochtonen. Besparen wil niet zeggen tegen alles nee zeggen. We liggen achter met de Europese Unie. En daarom hebben we een energie-unie, een digitale unie, een onderzoek- en ontwikkelingsunie nodig. We moeten de krachten bundelen. De tijd van de nationale kampioenen is voorbij. Is reddeloos voorbij. Aan al deze projecten werd gewerkt en wordt gewerkt in de Europese Raad en door de Europese Commissie. Maar het mag niet eindigen in de beroemde woorden verdienstelijk, maar onvoldoende. En het is eigenlijk geen troost dat ook de BRICS-landen hun economisch model moeten herzien. De opkomende landen zakken soms in plaats van te stijgen. Contradictio in terminis. De Unie moet zijn eigen model kiezen en zijn eigen model verstevigen. En mijn derde bedenking was over die combinatie tussen ethisch idealisme en politiek realisme. Ik heb in de vluchtelingencrisis veel horen spreken over indammen, pushbacks, repatriëren, aanzuigeffecten. En het is zo dat wij allen in onze edelmoedigheid gehinderd werden door de aantallen, door de massale immigratie in 2015, die in de mate van het mogelijke niet voor herhaling vatbaar was in het jaar 2016. Dat is het luik realisme. Het andere, de edelmoedigheid, was het luik idealisme. Maar dat vluchtelingen mensen zijn, heb ik zelden gehoord. En ik heb de verhalen van mijn moeder en grootmoeder niet vergeten. Op de vlucht in mei 1940 in Frankrijk. Het weinige dat ze hadden achterlatend. Een volk zonder visie gaat ten onder, zei de prediker. Maar een volk zonder geheugen gaat evenzeer ten onder. En daarom hebben wij en ethisch idealisme en politiek realisme nodig. Daaraan moet men ons herkennen. En het vierde is één beschaving en meerdere culturen. De vluchtelingencrisis leerde ons nog eens hoe belangrijk identiteit is. Het moet een positieve identiteit zijn. Fier zijn op wat we zijn. Fier zijn op wat we in het verleden hebben opgebouwd. Niet de negatieve identiteit, waarbij men de andere minacht, kleineert, om toch zelf maar iets te betekenen of iemand te zijn. Onze identiteit is opgebouwd, de Europese identiteit. Die is opgebouwd op een aantal publieke waarden die de kern van onze beschaving vormen. De politieke democratie, de rechtsstaat, de niet-discriminatie, de gelijkheid van man en vrouw, de scheiding van godsdienst en staat, de fundamentele vrijheden. Sommige van die waarheden, dat moeten we zeggen, die ontdekten we maar recent. Denk aan het stemrecht voor vrouwen, nog maar 70 jaar oud. Maar ze zijn nu onze way of life. Die waarden zijn fundamenteel, maar daar rond cirkelen verschillende culturen, religies, talen en volkeren. Niemand heeft het monopolie op de waarheid. Wij moeten een volk zijn van dialoog, van openheid, van respect, van gematigdheid. Wij moeten de revolutie van de gematigden prediken. Niet uit lauwheid, maar uit overtuiging. Wij zijn onverdraagzaam tegenover de onverdraagzame en zonder vergeving voor wie ons onze dierbaren wil ontnemen. Wij zijn ferm als het gaat om de kern van onze samenleving en open voor allen die met ons een gemeenschappelijke weg willen afleggen. De Belgen, de Vlamingen, hebben kalm, waardig, zonder wrok, zonder haat gereageerd na 22 maart. Hoewel ze terecht bang en kwaad waren. En ik ben fier, tegenstelling tot al wat men zegt in de internationale pers. Ik ben fier hoe wij hier samen hebben geleefd in die uren en in die dagen. Soms is de verdeling tussen wij en zij wel terecht. Maar meestal moet het gaan over ik en jij. Of liever, jij en ik. Daar is nog veel werk aan, ook in normale tijden. Wij hebben zo'n nood aan sociaal en familiaal kapitaal. En wij is de optelling van die vele ik- en jij-relaties. Gelukkig is dat niet alleen een opgave voor de politiek. Dan pas zullen we iets doen aan het geluksdeficit. Wij vinden alleen het geluk als we de zin van ons bestaan vinden. En die vinden we nooit bij onszelf alleen. Ladies and gentlemen, my fifth proposal was about Europe as a space and as a place. We live in a so-called multiple crisis. The European malaise is part of a much broader disenchantment. Europe is often a scapegoat, an alibi for failures elsewhere. And I'm fully aware that there is also a specific European problem. Let me briefly develop this point. Europe is a space, but has also got to be a place. According to some, the space is even becoming a threat. For them, there is even too much free movement of people, capital, goods and services, forgetting how many opportunities were created by that space. Think of students, tourists, investments, jobs. But Europe is not only the union for the movers, but also for the stayers at home. They don't feel protected enough by the union, though the political leadership is also protecting people, protecting against unemployment, huge inequalities, social dumping, unfair competition, financial speculation, tax evasion and tax fraud, uncontrolled immigration, terrorism. We need this combination of space and place in Europe and in each of our member states. En ten zesde, de Unie is dikwijls zodanig in zichzelf gekeerd door de problemen in de eurozone, dat ze onvoldoende aandacht had voor de problemen bij de buren. In dit geval de landen aan de Middellandse Zee, in Noord-Afrika, in het Midden-Oosten. We maakten onszelf wijs dat die 4 miljoen Syrische vluchtelingen daar voor altijd zouden blijven. We verminderden zelfs de humanitaire hulp aan de kampen, wat de trigger was volgens velen voor de exodus. De Unie moet ambitie hebben. Ze moet beginnen met een ambitie te hebben als een politieke regionale actor. Wil het ooit een globale speler worden? En mijn zevende punt. We have to keep the club together. A Brexit would be an amputation for the Union and of course a catastrophe for Britain. We avoided also a Grexit, and I'm still happy we succeeded. We have in the Union a common destiny, far beyond only economic objectives. Europe is first and foremost a political project. Ladies and gentlemen, I have my political career behind me, but I remain a very committed spectator, un spectateur engagé, an active citizen, a politician of the past, but a citizen of the future. Thank you for giving me the occasion to testify of this. Thank you.